Help support the show by joining the Patreon or becoming a YouTube member. Also, hit that like button and subscribe if you want more Browns-focused content. This super chat is from Jerry, who says, Q, just curious if you saw the Mary Kay article today, basically saying they plan to bring Watson back to compete for next year's starting job. Thank you. This is going to be a great transition into a video that I want to do for the main channel. And if you're watching this not live, you're going to see this on the main channel. But I saw this article dropped, right? And I saw the reaction to it. I got a bunch of people tweeting at me, posting to me on Blue Sky and everything, asking me about, okay, what's this mean? Oh my God, we're running it back with Deshaun Watson, basically going into a full-blown panic mode about this. And to me, when I see stuff like this, I think about the Baker Mayfield fiasco, right, where it was obviously over after week 16 with Baker Mayfield and the Cleveland Browns, but like we went through this whole song and dance in the offseason as if it wasn't over, but it was clearly not going to continue. This is a similar thing to me, because this report that we got from Jonathan Jones, right, of CBS, is basically the same report that we got for Thursday Night Football that made us think, oh yeah, they're definitely moving away from Deshaun Watson, right? Like, remember Thursday Night Football before the game, we get the report that Kevin's safe, Andrew Berry's safe. They're not going to switch to Mike Vrabel, and also, Deshaun's going to have the opportunity to compete. But they're going to bring in somebody to compete with Deshaun Watson, right? But now you switch the language, right? From somebody's going to compete with Deshaun Watson to he's going to get the opportunity to compete, and all of a sudden people read it like it's a different report. But let's go read the report real quick, right, to kind of prove my point about all of this, right? The Browns and Deshaun Watson, and this is Jonathan Jones, the guy who reported the thing that made people kind of freak out about it, right? Just read the byline here. Browns, Deshaun Watson, Kevin Stefanski, and Andrew Berry expected to be back amid lost 2025 season. Watson's future as the starting quarterback in Cleveland, however, is far less certain. Like that, you see that right there. Like, it's right there in the byline, right? But when he tweets it out, all you get is the headline, and people are like, oh my God, Deshaun's going to be back as the starter. But that's not really what's going down here, right? And then you can read in the article, it's basically the same report that we got a couple weeks ago during the Thursday Night Football game versus the Steelers, right? Mike Vrabel was on the sidelines during the game, but the Browns aren't going to do that. Sources have shot down the idea of Vrabel would take the job in Cleveland and all of this stuff, which again is the same stuff that we heard back then. Haslam told ESPN this week at a league meeting he supported Stefanski and Berry, and that this season has been a little perplexing following a playoff run. Again, it's notable, right? Haslam's vocal support has been behind Kevin Stefanski and Andrew Berry, not necessarily behind Deshaun Watson, which is hilarious, right? Kind of proves the point here on the story, where it's like, okay, Haslam's not really putting his vocal support behind this. There's a whole bunch of details about how bad Deshaun Watson has been, contract, all of that stuff is in there. And basically, if you read through this article, he says, yeah, Deshaun Watson, because of how much money he makes, will be back next year, or might be back next year, but his future as the starter is uncertain. It's exactly what's in the byline, right? That's the same report that we got 3 weeks ago. Another thing that kind of muddied the waters is how Mary Kay framed her report. Let's go look at her article, right? Why the Browns are giving Deshaun Watson a chance to compete, to come back and compete at least for the starting job, Browns insider says. Again, this is all the stuff that we heard from the last report, right? Where it's like, oh, the Browns are going to demote Deshaun, not make him the definitive starter, but he's going to have a chance to compete. Now, this is Mary Kay not reporting anything. She's just kind of rationalizing what she's writing here, right? And how she rationalizes it is simple, where she's saying, okay, the Browns owe Deshaun a lot of money. That would be a lot of money to have for somebody to sit the bench. And because they think that player's that he has a lot of money coming to him, right? That means that the Browns are going to give him a chance to compete, or at least that's the rationalization for the Browns, giving him a chance to compete. Again, these reports were identical to the reports that we heard when it comes to what the Browns are doing with Deshaun Watson, Kevin Stefanski, Andrew Berry from the Thursday night game that we got from like Albert Breer, right, and Ian Rappaport. So nothing's changed when it comes to where the Browns are. They are clearly moving away from Watson, right? The fact that Watson has to compete for a starting job and that it's getting reinforced in multiple reports that he's expected to compete for a starting job. The fact that Jimmy Haslam is not vocally supporting the quarterback that he's paying a ton of money to. That tells you right there that there's no guarantee about what Watson is going to be to this team next year, especially there's no guarantee that he's going to be the starter. Now, think about it like this. The same thing we had to do with Baker Mayfield, right? Where we're like, okay, the Browns have clearly made it clear that they're not interested with Baker Mayfield. Is he going to come back? Is he not? Like, we're not debating whether they should have kept Baker Mayfield or not. Those debates are what those debates are, right? A lot of people are going to think the Browns should have kept Baker Mayfield. But this is where these kind of reports are kind of similar to me, because it's like, okay, the Browns were interested. Yeah. This is where I think these reports are kind of similar to me, where it's like, okay, you know, there's justification to bring him back. Baker was on his 5th-year option. He's going to at least get a chance to compete for the starting job next year, was basically the stuff that we were hearing at the end of the season. And the reason I'm like, I don't think he's going to play or really be on the team next year, Deshaun Watson at least, is a similar reason why Baker never ended up playing and being on the team, because Deshaun sees himself as a starting quality quarterback. So when he comes back, or when he's trying to come back and you're telling him he's not guaranteed a starting job, well, he's going to look at his options too. And he might think, hey, it might be better for me to sit this year out. And this is the thing, right? When you look at the report and you look at it as not just what the Browns plan to do, but also like what the reaction is going to be from Watson, it's likely that Watson does not come back. Now, they're just going off of what they know from what they're hearing from people in the building and their sources and whatever. But the way I see it is this. They are very obviously not planning to bring Deshaun Watson back as the guaranteed starter next year. Every report has it. Even Mary Kay, who was defending the idea of the Browns bringing back Watson as the starter, and still does in that article to an extent, she has even backed down to, well, you can't guarantee that he's going to be the starter next year. That's where this whole thing is with Watson. He's clearly not going to be guaranteed to be the starter next year. If anything, we're already at that point. It's December in 2024. We're talking about what's going to happen in September of 2025. We're already down to the point to where he's not guaranteed to have the job. He's at least going to have competition. Well, how is Watson's camp going to react to that? You know, are they going to want to come back from an Achilles injury just to compete for a starting job? Or do they think it's a fair spot to put him in where he's coming back from an Achilles injury to compete for a starting job? Are they willing to accept that that's just the reality of where Watson is in his career? I mean, they're highly delusional there. So I don't think that's going to be the case either. So all I see is two trains on different paths that are obviously either on a collision course or about to pass each other and never see each other again. Because that is where Deshaun is. That is where the Browns are. The Browns are not intent on bringing him back as the starter next year. Deshaun Watson probably wants to be a starter. These two ideas are not compatible. Also, another thing to think about with like bringing back Deshaun Watson is this. Will it be worth the kind of mess, the circus that it's obviously going to be, right? If Watson, like when is Watson even going to be back from that injury? He suffered that injury in October, right? Aggressive estimate could be he could be back by the last week of training camp. My question to you is, how is Deshaun Watson going to be expected to compete for a starting job if he comes back after the end of camp? Like, how do you compete for a job when you're not there for most of the competition? Like, what's going to happen there? And then what, are you going to compete for the job during the season? How does that work? Like, just not a lot of this makes a ton of sense here for it to be a competition, right? When you think about it, which makes me think competition is just the word that they're using to kind of state where they are right now, which is they definitely don't want to bring him back as a starter. Because how would even a competition work for Deshaun Watson at this point? Like, when would he compete? Because an aggressive estimate would put him back again around September. So what he's going to, again, there's limited options to compete there, right? So what does that even mean that he's going to compete? He's not going to be back in the spring to compete with whoever you bring on the roster or draft. So to me, these articles that have dropped, it's just a reiteration of what we already knew. I don't think it really changes anything. And if anything, it kind of reinforces that how I feel about the Browns and Watson, which is they're not going back to him after this year. So one of the things I hate is when people come on here and you're talking about whether the Browns should move on from Watson, whether they should stay with Watson, and then somebody pops up and they ask you this question as if like you're saying the only thing wrong with the Browns is Deshaun Watson. That's not the case. The Browns have other problems than Deshaun Watson, but Deshaun Watson was one of the main problems why he was out there that led to you having a 1-7 record or 1-6 record in his first, 7 games to start the year. Like, he was a huge part of that, right? Like, he wasn't the only problem. Yes, you need a better run game. Yes, you need a better, some better threats at wide receiver. Yes, you needed other things, right? But Watson was one of the main issues that were keeping you non-competitive. I mean, like the Browns' issues, all the issues they've had this year, when they get decent quarterback play, they've been able to be competitive in games. When they haven't gotten decent quarterback play, like they're getting against the Chiefs today, they haven't been able to be competitive, right? And Deshaun was giving you bad quarterback play, like 6 out of those 7 games that he played in. And that ended up being a big albatross for this team to carry, that they could not carry the victory. So that is what people mean. Nobody who says the Browns should move on from Watson is convinced that you just get rid of Watson and then boom, you win a bunch of games next year, right? That's not the argument that a bunch of people are making. They're just saying, hey, Watson is clearly one of the biggest problems on this team. I think these people will also agree the run game has been a big problem for this team as Nick Chubb fumbles, as I'm literally talking right now after getting his best run of the night. The Browns have other issues too. But quarterback is one of those main issues. So, yes, you have to address quarterback. Yes, you have to address the run game. But the offseason is not just singular focus. You can address multiple needs in the offseason and continue on like that. So I hate when people frame any Watson argument like that because it just misses the point. The question is, did Watson play well enough to continue being your starting quarterback of the Cleveland Browns? The answer is obviously no. It doesn't matter if the Browns had other problems. Deshaun Watson was a part of the problem and why the team was so bad, so you got to do something about that, right? Which means they're probably moving on from Deshaun Watson after this year. The fact that we're not hearing that there's a full defense of him and, the offense was bad and Deshaun's going to be good next year. That's the stuff that you would be hearing if Deshaun was guaranteed to come back next year and be the starting quarterback for the team. That would be the stuff that you would hear. But because that's not the case, we're not hearing any of that. It's pretty obvious to me that they are planning to move on sooner than later with Deshaun at the quarterback position. I'm going to address a super chat we got earlier from Corley. I didn't get to address it while I was talking about it at first, but Corley makes up a great point here, which is, hey, Watson was literally so bad you couldn't evaluate the rest of the team. And that's a big thing, right? Because Watson was playing so bad, we couldn't really evaluate what we had in Jerry Jeudy and what